Satoru Gojo's death gave the fandom no goodbye. Tonight, we give him one more fight. Welcome to ReWritten. In this explainer, we are stepping into a completely different timeline. You know, the conclusion of the Shinjuku Showdown arc left this incredible, violently debated mark on the whole anime and manga community. After this absolutely awe-inspiring display of jujutsu mastery, readers just turn the page to find the world's strongest sorcerer cleanly bisected at the waist. Sukuna's world-cutting slash bypassed literally everything, giving us this sudden off-screen execution. And for a huge part of the fandom, it just felt like an incomplete farewell, right? A jarring trick that left Gojo's ultimate goal, protecting and elevating his students, completely unresolved. So today, we're exploring a lore-accurate, alternate reimagining of that chapter, a timeline born directly from the fandom's grief, but strictly grounded in the canon rules of the universe, to give the strongest sorcerer one final devastating send-off. Okay, let's dive into this. Our alternative timeline begins right at the climax of the final war. At 0 seconds, the battle against Roman Sukuna concludes through the sheer, indomitable willpower of the next generation. Yuji's soul-shaking black flashes, Nobara's resonance, and Megumi finally waking from his despair successfully tear the King of Curses apart. 30 seconds later, the surviving sorcerers, battered, missing limbs, basically bleeding out, collapse into the rubble of Shinjuku. They share this fleeting, desperate moment of relief. The nightmare is finally over. But at the 60-second mark, the ultimate, horrifying twist occurs. Hidden in the shadows of a shattered barrier, the dying brain of Kenjaku spasms one final time. In his last, spiteful act, he successfully activates the Tengen Merger. The victory over Sukuna instantly curdles into an apocalyptic catastrophe, and the sky above Tokyo literally cracks open, bleeding a sickening, bruised purple. Now, what emerges here is not your typical villain with a grand philosophical monologue. The merger exists entirely independent of its creator now, and it is fully uncontrollable. The ambient cursed energy of millions across Japan violently coalesces with Master Tengen's hyper-evolved essence. This entity is an abominable amalgamation of humanity's malice, grief, and fear. It has no ego, no cursed technique to analyze or counter. It's simply a walking natural disaster. Basically, a localized extinction event that warps gravity and reality merely by existing. The creeping dread in this moment is absolute and completely suffocating. The surviving students are forced back to their feet, desperately throwing themselves into the fray, but the battle is hopelessly, devastatingly one-sided. It's a systematic defeat. Yuta Okotsu's copy techniques shatter against the entity's skin like fragile glass. Maki Zenin finds herself unable to even approach. The sheer atmospheric pressure of the creature's aura is literally crushing the ground beneath her feet. Megumi's shadowy shikigami are absorbed instantly into the beast's expanding mass. And Yuji, burning his own life force to strike at its soul, finds that the entity actually has no single soul to target. It is an ocean of screaming, fragmented consciousnesses. They are being completely erased. They survived the strongest sorcerer in history, only to be slaughtered by a faceless god of their own world's making. And then, a blinding, familiar spark of cursed energy flares in the distance. Gojo Satoru returns. But he doesn't arrive with his usual arrogant swagger. He isn't hovering above the earth with that godlike smirk. He's mortally injured, sutured together by Shoko Iairi's desperate healing and his own sheer refusal to die. His uniform is soaked completely black with blood. His cursed energy is barely a flickering ember. He is pale, stumbling, and operating on borrowed seconds. But he is alive, and he places himself squarely between his battered, weeping students and the apocalypse. Now, what's absolutely crucial here is how Gojo assesses the merger. With his 6 eyes, he knows immediately there is no conventional path to victory. No domain expansion left, 0 stamina. It requires a miracle. And as we know in this world, miracles are bought with binding vows. Gojo initiates a contract more absolute than any in history. He doesn't just offer his life, he offers his very existence. He sacrifices his soul, permanently severing his ties to the karmic cycle. This means he will never reincarnate, never reach an afterlife, and never see his fallen friends in any airport. He gives up absolutely everything. In exchange for this total existential erasure, the vow grants him a momentary, infinite conversion rate of cursed energy. The air around Gojo detonates with beautiful, violent force. The sky screams as the concepts of attraction and repulsion are dragged out of the vacuum of his dying spirit. In his right hand, the brilliant, crushing blue of limitless blue forms, literally pulling the rubble of Tokyo into its orbit. In his left hand, the blinding, violent red of limitless red ignites, pushing the air away with atomic force. He doesn't chant, he doesn't weave signs. He simply slams his hands together, pouring the entirety of his vanishing existence into the technique. Hollow purple! It is of asteroid-scale proportions, a world-consuming tidal wave of imaginary mass that instantly disintegrates the space it touches. It crashes into the Tengen Merger with the fury of a dying star. The entity shrieks as its unfathomable mass is actively erased from reality by the sheer impossible output of the strongest sorcerer who ever lived. But as the blinding light bathes his face, there's no anger in Gojo's glowing blue eyes. There's no pride in being the pinnacle of strength. This world-ending attack is fired purely out of love. As his physical body begins to flake away into glowing ash, Gojo Satoru's internal thoughts are deeply peaceful. For his entire life, his immense power has been a cage. It forced him to walk alone. It forced him to look down at the world. Always the protector, always the weapon, always the failsafe. A god among men who could never truly stand beside them. He had spent his life desperately trying to raise strong allies. Yet he was entirely unable to let go. His greatest anxiety, always burning right beneath the surface, was the absolute terror that the moment he stepped away, the people he cared about would die. That the world he envisioned would shatter the second he wasn't there to hold up the sky. But as he watches the purple light wash over the battlefield, shielding his students, that anxiety finally breaks. He sees Yuji fighting to stand. He sees Megumi looking up at him. He sees Yuta and Maki, battered but unbroken. In this fleeting moment of non-existence, he realizes the profound truth. They fought a god, and they survived long enough for him to arrive. They are strong enough. He finally, completely trusts them to survive without him. The burden of being the strongest finally lifts from his shoulders. It dissolves into the brilliant light right alongside his physical form. He smiles, closes his eyes, and completely lets go. The Tengen Merger is utterly obliterated. The apocalyptic storm clouds break, and the first rays of morning sunlight filter down onto the ruined streets of Shinjuku. The surviving students push themselves up from the rubble and look toward where their teacher just stood. There is nothing there. No body to bury, no torn blindfold on the pavement. Gojo Satoru is permanently, irrevocably gone. The silence that stretches across the battlefield is heavy with a complex, crushing grief. For the survivors, the realization slowly washes over them. The era of relying on a godlike figure to save everyone is definitively broken. There's no one left to hide behind. The future is now entirely theirs. It is terrifying, unmapped, and undeniably free. And this brilliantly illustrates the philosophical divide at the heart of this story. On one side, we have our fan rewrite, offering narrative closure, agency, and mythic martyrdom. It grants Gojo the protective, world-saving sacrifice that aligns perfectly with his foundational goal, which was laying down his life so the youth can inherit the future. But on the other side, we have Gege Akutami's original canon, which prioritizes thematic realism, tragedy, and a brutal, uncompromising finality. It portrays absolute strength exactly as intended, as a tragic, isolating curse, not a heroic gift. But we also have to impartially explore what this fix actually costs the narrative. Bringing Gojo back, even just to die again, arguably undercuts the shocking emotional realism of his original death. By having Gojo cast one final spell, the story leans on the strongest one last time. It kind of contradicts the thesis that the next generation must fully surpass the old. Because let's be real, if Gojo bails them out of the merger, have they really surpassed him? A heroic sacrifice undeniably softens the harsh, jagged edges of Akutami's brutal universe. Ultimately, the genuine verdict lies somewhere in the messy middle. Akutami's original ending is daring, and it's philosophically consistent with the uncompromising cruelty of his world. But a story is a conversation between author and audience, and the suddenness of his canon death severed that conversation violently. The alternate timeline we explored today honors the emotional dissonance the readers felt. It prioritizes the heart of the audience, granting character agency over grim themes. So, what does this all mean? I leave you with this final thought, ringing in the silence of Shinjuku. When looking at the legacy of a character who literally defined a generation, what truly serves the story better? A heroic sacrifice layered with agency and emotional closure? Or a sudden,
painfully unfair end that forces the world to move on without its god? Let that question sit with you. Thank you for joining me for this explainer, and be sure to subscribe to ReWritten for more deep dives into the stories we love.